Hi everyone, welcome in our new lesson. Before we go ahead, remember to subscribe to our channel, leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed the video. Today we talk mainly about types of couriers that you can use when shipping B2C. As many of you know, there are three types of couriers that you can use when shipping B2C. Express couriers, postal couriers, and hybrid solutions. Let's look at the main differences. For an express courier, the prices and rates are quite high compared to postal and hybrid solutions, but the transit times are way faster and the level of service is very high. For postal couriers instead, it's quite long, the transit time. We can say around 15 to 20 days or business days. It really depends on the destination. For example, to reach the Brazil, let's say, market, it's going to take maybe up to 30 days or even 60 days. Then we have hybrid solutions, which, let's say, they are a combination of both, and they can have a range of transit times between 6 to 12 days. It's a little bit more expensive than postal services, but less expensive than express. Postal services instead are quite cheap, but also the level of service that you get is quite low as well, because you pay a very cheap price. If you're just starting your business, you may want to consider a postal or hybrid solution to start, so you could save some costs, and maybe at the end of the day, the solution that you find, it's actually great, and you stick to it. It also depends on the type of clientele that you have, but also the countries you target. As mentioned, Brazil, it takes a long time to get parcels delivered there. So maybe you want to consider an express options for certain markets, but a postal or hybrid solutions for others. But what are the main differences other than price? Well, we have weight calculations, surcharges, pickups, capacity and transit times. So for weight calculations, generally there are two rules. Either they charge you by actual weight, which means that if you put your product on a weight scale and it weighs 200 grams, you're going to pay for 200 grams. However, there are also carriers that charge you whichever is higher between volumetric weight and actual weight, which means that the dimensions of your product, actually your shipping box, matter. So if the product or the box is too big, you're going to pay for the volumetric weight instead of the actual weight. And that can be quite expensive. So always try to understand the weight calculation behind the rate. Then you have surcharges. So for certain areas, like especially in Australia or the US, since it's quite big as a territory, there may be some areas that are considered remote and you're going to pay a surcharge for that. You can pay a surcharge, for example, for the peak season for certain couriers, for example, in November and December. So be careful and try to understand if there's any surcharge and applies on top of the rate for any circumstance. Then you have the pickup. Certain couriers do come to pick up to your warehouse, certain couriers don't. And this means that you will have to schedule and book your own truck to deliver to their hub, and that's an additional cost. Then you have capacity, which means how many orders they can handle. So you have to make sure that they have enough capacity to handle all your growth, but all the orders that you currently have and the potential growth. Then you have transit times. So generally, express courier, as mentioned, they have quite fast transit times. Postal couriers a little bit longer, and hybrid in between. But always ask what are the transit times, and also currently, due to COVID, transit time may vary, so make sure you also understand how much they can vary. It's like one day, it's like a week. So you try to understand also how long it's going to take in the worst case scenario. For the weight calculation, how do we actually calculate the weight if we have actual weight and volumetric weight for the courier and the weight they charge? So actual weight, we said that it's simply the weight of the product itself. So if you take it and you put it on a weight scale, the weight that it comes out is basically the actual weight of your product. So let's say 200 grams. And then the volumetric weight is the weight given by the dimensions of your product. Let's say the shipping box, the outer box. So volumetric weight, how do you calculate how much it weighs your product based on the dimension? Generally, there's a standard rules, which basically is the multiplication of length, width, and height, all divided by 5,000. So if you look at the formula on the left side, you just need to follow that rule. However, sometimes some couriers may use a different number. Instead of 5,000, maybe 6,000 or 4,000 or 3,000. So you can still inquire the courier and ask them, okay, what's your rule to calculate volumetric weight? And then you know that if they follow the general rule of charging you whichever is higher between actual weight and volumetric weight, you can calculate yourself and understand how much you're going to pay based on the different dimensions of your products or the order types and so on. Also, be careful on change of address. For example, when you use an express courier, they can still change the address, especially if the final customer is not at home. So let's say that they call your final customer and ask, all right, you're not at home, what shall we do? And they're like, oh, I'm not at home, you can leave to this address and I will collect later. So in that case, the final customer is asking to change the address. And if that happens automatically, you're going to get charged more. Then careful on the customer support too, because you want to have an account manager or someone you can talk to in case of an emergency, especially when you have a lot of orders. Otherwise, if you're still quite small in terms of number of orders, they may just redirect you to the customer support hotline. Returns. Sometimes they automatically return. Sometimes they will ask you if you want to return or dispose of your products. Well, it really depends on the deal that you have with the courier, so just make sure that you check the way the returns are handled. If they ask you if there's a policy, if they actually can return it or not. Claims and refunds. There should always be, let's say, an insurance or a little claim that you can get back. For example, for express couriers, maybe a little bit more. For postal services, they may only refund you the freight costs, which means how much you paid for shipping, but not the actual product. It really depends, so just make sure you ask what's the rule and what's the policy for claims and refunds. And it needs to be both for damages and losses, because if they only allow refunds if the product is lost or the order is lost, then what about damages? For you, it's still a loss. So just make sure you clarify that part. PO boxes, APO, FPO, parcel lockers, those are a really special way of delivery. There are countries that only support, for example, PO boxes, or that mainly support PO boxes, like Dubai, for example, the city of Dubai. But APO or FPO, they are military addresses, so not everyone can actually go there and deliver. And parcel lockers, it really depends. So certain couriers do deliver there, certain couriers cannot. So make sure you ask, and you should also understand if you do want to provide this, let's say, option or not in your shopping cart, based on the courier that you use and if they support it. Remote areas, we mentioned earlier, there are some areas that are considered remote and you may pay a surcharge for that. So just ask, inquire the courier, how do you deal with that, right? In case there's a remote areas and you're going to charge me directly, you're going to let me know upfront or right after, how does it work? So you're prepared. And then you have oversized parcels. Just make sure you ask the maximum dimension that it's basically allowed within that rate. Because sometimes when you ship a pallet, definitely the rate that the courier will offer you is not the same per kilogram that you have for B2C or general shipments that have commonly 1 box, 2 boxes, or maximum 3 boxes. So make sure you ask what's the policy for oversized parcels. Let's say there should be like a minimum or maximum dimension that the courier will allow within that rate, the proposed rate. So make sure you check that as well to avoid surprises. That's all for today. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.